The blood-red Valentino wrap dress hanging in Park Peng's forbidden wing cost $47,000. Vivian Boyd didn't know that when her trembling fingers touched the silk at 11:38 p.m., she'd been cleaning for 19 hours straight. 3 buildings, 6 floors, 1 broken woman. Her reflection in Park's floor-to-ceiling windows showed someone she didn't recognize anymore. Hollow-eyed, invisible, desperate. Just once, she thought, I want to feel expensive. The dress slid over her skin like a whisper. She sank into his executive leather chair, pretending, just for 60 seconds, that this life was hers. At 11:52 p.m., Park Peng's private elevator opened with a sound like a death knell. His 6'1" frame froze in the doorway. The penthouse lights illuminated the impossible. A stranger wearing her dress, sitting in his chair, breathing his air. Park's hands didn't shake. They never did. He pulled out his phone, with surgical precision. Jung-ho, bring me the lockbox from my office. Yes, the one with the passports. No, don't ask questions. His security chief disappeared. Park approached Vivian slowly, deliberately, like a predator who'd already won. What is Park about to do with those documents? And how did a cleaning woman's 60-second fantasy become a lifetime sentence? This story will take you on a journey you won't forget. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because what happens next is going to shock you to your core. Now let's go back to where this whole nightmare began. Park Peng's mornings began at exactly 5:47 a.m., not because of an alarm, but because his body had learned that punctuality was the only thing separating order from chaos. The penthouse was silent except for the rhythmic sound of his breathing. 4 counts in, hold for 7, 8 counts out. A technique his therapist had taught him before he'd fired her for suggesting his routines were unhealthy. What did she know about health? She didn't understand that routines were the architecture holding his fractured mind together. He stepped onto the bathroom floor, his bare feet meeting cold marble at the exact same spot they met every morning. 3 tiles from the wall, 2 tiles from the shower. Always. The towels hung in perfect alignment. White on the left, gray in the middle, black on the right. He'd fired a housekeeper once for reversing the order. She'd cried, said it was an honest mistake. Park had handed her severance with gloved hands and never thought of her again. Mistakes weren't honest. They were cracks in the foundation. By 6:15 a.m., he stood before the shrine. That's what his security team called it, though never to his face. The Forbidden Wing, an entire section of the penthouse preserved exactly as it had been 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days ago. The day Min Seo died. Her vanity held 23 items, arranged by height and frequency of use. Her favorite lipstick, Tom Ford's Cherry Lush, sat third from the left, still carrying the indent of her lips on the bullet. Park had measured it once with calipers to ensure the cleaning staff never moved it, even a millimeter. They hadn't. They were too terrified. He stood 3 feet from the vanity, never closer. Close enough to see, far enough to preserve. His fingers flexed inside his black leather gloves. He never touched anything in this room with bare skin. Contamination worked both ways. The world was filthy, unpredictable, chaotic. But this room was sacred. Sterile, perfect. Good morning, Min Seo, he whispered in Korean, his voice barely audible. The ritual never changed. He would stand for exactly 7 minutes, the number of years they'd been married. He would observe every object, ensuring nothing had shifted in the night. The Chanel No. 5 bottle, at a 45-degree angle to the mirror's edge. The pearl earrings in their velvet box, clasps facing north. The red dress. God, the red dress. It hung in the glass-enclosed closet like a ghost-wearing skin. Valentino, custom-made for Min Seo's frame, purchased during their honeymoon in Milan. She'd worn it twice. Once to his father's funeral, where she'd held Park's hand so tightly his bones ached. Once to the charity gala 3 weeks before the accident, where she'd laughed at his terrible jokes and made him believe, just for a moment, that he wasn't a monster running a criminal empire. The dress was the only item he'd had professionally sealed in a climate-controlled case. Temperature, exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity, 45%. The glass was bulletproof, because the idea of anything happening to that dress made Park's chest constrict so violently he couldn't breathe. His phone buzzed at 6:22 a.m., a reminder he'd set himself, though he never needed it. Time to leave the wing. He backed out slowly, never turning his back on the shrine, another rule only he understood. At the threshold, he pressed his palm to the biometric scanner. The reinforced doors sealed with a pneumatic hiss. No one entered the Forbidden Wing, except Park. Not his security. Not his housekeepers. Not even his second-in-command, Jung-ho, who'd taken bullets for him in Busan and never asked questions. The wing existed in a quantum state, perfectly preserved, perpetually mourned, forever 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days ago. In the kitchen, his breakfast waited on the granite island. 2 soft-boiled eggs, toast cut into perfect triangles, Black coffee at exactly 160 degrees. The housekeeper who prepared his meals had worked for him for 6 years and had never seen his face. She arrived at 4:30 a.m., prepared everything according to the laminated instruction sheets Park updated monthly, and left before he emerged from his bedroom. He ate mechanically, his mind already cataloging the day's agenda. A meeting with the Yakuza representatives at 9 a.m. A shipment inspection, at the docks at 2 p.m. evening collections from the Gangnam district clubs. All of it required precision, control, the illusion that Park Pyeng was a man who could be trusted because he never deviated from his word. They didn't know the truth, that every smile was practiced in the mirror, that every handshake made his skin crawl, that the only real thing left in his hollow chest was a glass-encased red dress and the ghost of a woman who'd loved him despite the darkness. At 7:43 a.m., Park left for the office, his penthouse sealing behind him like a tomb. He had no idea that in 11 hours, someone would shatter everything. Vivian Boyd's day began at 4:15 a.m. in a one-bedroom apartment she shared with her aunt, her cousin, and a persistent mold problem the landlord refused to fix. She'd learned to wake up before her alarm, silencing her phone before the buzzing could disturb the only two people in Seoul who still believed she'd make something of herself. Liars, both of them. Sweet, delusional liars. She dressed in the dark, black pants, black shirt, black shoes worn so thin she could feel every crack in the pavement. The uniform of invisibility. In 6 months working for Morrison Cleaning Services, she'd scrubbed the toilets of tech billionaires, mopped the floors of K-pop agencies, and wiped down the windows of penthouses with views that cost more than her entire life's earnings. Not one of them had ever looked her in the eye. By 5 a.m. she was on the subway, pressed between bodies that smelled like coffee and desperation. Her phone screen showed the math she'd done 17 times already. 147 million in debt. Her father's hospital bills from the cancer that had killed him anyway. Her mother's funeral costs back in Chicago. The loan shark her aunt had borrowed from when Vivian's work visa fees came due. 47 million, and she made 2.1 million per month before taxes. If she never ate, never slept, never stopped working, she'd be free in approximately never. The first building was a tech startup in Gangnam. 4 floors, 3 bathrooms per floor, all of them destroyed by boys who'd never cleaned anything in their lives. She scrubbed beer vomit from toilet bowls while they slept in their ergonomic chairs, dreaming of IPOs and corner offices. By noon, her knees were screaming. By 3 p.m., she'd moved to the second location, a hotel in Itaewon, where the rich brought their secrets. She changed sheets that smelled like expensive cologne and cheaper decisions, found a diamond earring under a bed and turned it in to the manager, who looked at her like she was stupid for not pocketing it. Maybe she was. By 7 p.m., she was supposed to be done. But Ji-won had called in sick, again, and Morrison's owner had that special tone in his voice that meant, do it, or you're fired. So Vivian added a third shift to the roster, Park Pyeng's penthouse in Cheongdam-dong. She'd never cleaned it before. The regular girl, Soo-jin, guarded the assignment like a state secret. Premium client, premium pay, premium rules. Don't touch anything in the West Wing. Don't look directly at Mr. Park if he's home. Don't even breathe wrong. Soo-jin had lasted 3 years on this job. Vivian understood why the moment she stepped through the service entrance at 9 p.m. The penthouse was a museum of obsession. Every surface gleamed like it had been polished by monks. The furniture sat at perfect right angles. Even the air felt organized, filtered through some system that removed every particle of Seoul's pollution. Her reflection in the marble floor looked clearer than it did in her bathroom mirror. The instruction manual was 47 pages long. Vivian held it in her raw, bleeding hands and wanted to cry. Instructions for cleaning the baseboards. Microfiber cloth only. Distilled water. Wipe in the direction of the grain. Instructions for the windows. Streak-free solution applied in circular motions, never horizontal. Instructions for entering and exiting rooms. Always backward. Never turn your back on the space you've just cleaned. It was insane. It was meticulous. It was the kind of thing designed by someone who believed control could stop the world from ending. By 11:30 p.m., she'd finished everything except the Forbidden Wing. The West Wing. The locked doors with the biometric scanner that, according to the manual's bold underlined text, she was never to attempt to open under any circumstances. But the doors weren't locked. Vivian stood in the hallway, staring at the gap of soft light spilling from the cracked entrance. Someone had forgotten. Some security guard or housekeeper had broken the sacred rule, and now the Forbidden Wing sat open like a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. She should have walked away. Should have texted Morrison, reported the security breach, collected her 180,000 for the night and left. Instead, she stepped inside. The room was a time capsule. A woman's vanity covered in perfume bottles, arranged like soldiers. A closet with a single dress sealed in glass like a museum artifact. Photographs on the walls. A beautiful Korean woman with a smile that looked almost real, standing next to a man whose face was cold even in moments of supposed happiness. Park's late wife. It had to be. Vivian moved closer to the glass case, drawn by the red dress like a moth to fire. Valentino, the tag read. The fabric seemed to glow under the precise lighting, every fold perfect, every line intentional. She'd never touched anything so beautiful in her life. Her reflection in the glass looked like a ghost, exhausted, invisible, erased. But for just a second, she let herself imagine. What would it feel like to be the kind of woman who wore dresses that cost more than debts? Who sat in leather chairs and made decisions instead of cleaning up after them? The zipper on the glass case wasn't locked. Vivian's hands moved before her brain could stop them. The silk felt like water against Vivian's skin, cool and impossibly smooth. She'd been careful, so careful, sliding the dress over her work clothes, not wanting to contaminate it with her sweat and exhaustion. It fit almost perfectly, just slightly loose at the waist, where Minseo had apparently been thinner, more delicate, more everything Vivian would never be. She caught her reflection in the full-length mirror, and for 3 heartbeats, she wasn't Vivian Boyd, debt-ridden cleaner with bloody knuckles and a tourist visa about to expire. She was someone else. Someone worth looking at. The executive chair in Park's office had called to her like a siren song. Just for a minute, she'd thought. Just to see what it feels like to sit where power sits. The leather embraced her like an apology. Her eyes had closed, despite every instinct screaming at her to stay alert. And then the elevator chimed, and Vivian's fairy tale died. Now she stood frozen in the center of Park's office, still wearing the red dress, watching him issue orders in Korean with a voice like winter. The security chief, a mountain of a man with dead eyes, had vanished into the elevator at Park's command, taking with him Vivian's last hope of witnesses. The door sealed shut. Park Pyeng turned to face her fully for the first time, and Vivian understood why grown men with guns feared him. It wasn't his height, or his build, or the expensive suit that probably cost more than her father's entire cancer treatment. It was his eyes. They looked at her the way a scientist looked at a contaminated petri dish, with clinical disgust and terrible curiosity. "Do you speak Korean?" His English was perfect, barely accented, which somehow made it worse. "No. I mean, a little. Basic phrases." Vivian's voice sounded small in the cavernous office. "Mr. Park, I can explain. You're wearing my wife's dress." He said it like he was commenting on the weather, but his hands, gloved in black leather despite the late hour, flexed at his sides. The dress I had preserved in a climate-controlled case. The dress no one was permitted to touch. "Do you understand what you've done?" "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." "You weren't thinking." Park moved closer, circling her like a predator. Thinking would have required reading the 47-page manual that explicitly forbids entry into the West Wing. Thinking would have required basic human decency, not to desecrate a dead woman's belongings. Vivian's throat closed. She reached for the zipper, desperate to remove the evidence of her stupidity. "I'll take it off right now. I'll pay for any damage." "Stop." The command froze her mid-motion. "Don't touch the zipper. You've contaminated enough." Her hands dropped to her sides, trembling. "Please. I need this job. I'll work for free. I'll do anything. You'll do exactly what I tell you to do." Park pulled out his phone, tapping the screen with methodical precision. "Morrison Cleaning Services. I assume you work for them?" "Yes, but not anymore. I've just purchased your contract. Along with," he scrolled through something on his screen, "the $147 million, one debt registered to your name and your aunt's. Quite a sum for someone making $2.1 million won per month." The floor tilted beneath Vivian's feet. "How do you can't just..." "I can do anything I want. That's what happens when you own half of Seoul's underground, and most of its surface." He pocketed his phone and walked to his desk, opening a drawer with a key from his pocket. "You have 2 choices, Miss Boyd. I can call the police right now and report you for theft of a $147 million won designer dress. Yes, that's what it's worth. Add breaking and entering a restricted area. Contamination of a controlled environment. You'd be deported within 48 hours, and your aunt would inherit your debt plus legal fees." Vivian's knees gave out. She caught herself on the arm of his chair, the same chair she'd been sleeping in minutes ago when life still made sense. "What's the second choice?" Park pulled something from the drawer. Her passport. The blue American eagle looked like a joke in his gloved hands. "The second choice is you stay. You work off your debt, all of it. The money you owe, plus the value of the dress you've ruined with your skin oils and cheap perfume, plus the cost of decontaminating the entire West Wing." He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and opened a small panel she hadn't noticed before. Behind it was a safe. Her passport disappeared inside with a finality that made Vivian's chest constrict. "I didn't ruin anything," she whispered. "I was careful." You breathed on it. You touched it with unwashed hands. You sat in my chair, walked on my floors, existed in a space that was sealed and sacred. Park's voice never rose above conversational, which made every word cut deeper. Nothing about you is careful. You're chaos in human form. How long? The question scraped out of her throat. How long do I have to stay? Park smiled, and it was the cruelest thing Vivian had ever seen. Until I decide you've atoned. Could be 6 months. Could be 6 years. Depends entirely on how well you learn to follow the rules. That's slavery. This isn't legal. Neither is your expired work visa. Neither is the money your aunt borrowed from the Jade Dragon Triad. Neither is breaking into a private residence and stealing irreplaceable property. He moved back to his desk, pressing a button that made a section of the wall slide open, revealing a small bedroom. This is where you'll sleep. You'll wake at 5:47 a.m. You'll follow every instruction I give without question. You'll wear what I tell you to wear, eat what I provide, speak when spoken to. Vivian looked at the bedroom, barely larger than a closet, but furnished with the same obsessive precision as the rest of the penthouse. A narrow bed with hospital corners. A desk with nothing on it. A single lamp positioned at an exact angle. And if I refuse, Park's expression didn't change. Then I make one phone call, and your aunt's body gets found in the Han River. The Triads don't appreciate defaulted loans. The air left Vivian's lungs. So you see, Miss Boyd, you don't actually have two choices. You only ever had one. Park walked to the elevator and pressed the button. Take off the dress, carefully. Hang it exactly as you found it. Then report to your new quarters. Your orientation begins in 6 hours. The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside without looking back. Welcome home, he said as the doors closed, and Vivian stood alone in a penthouse that had just become her prison, still wearing a dead woman's dress. The manual arrived at exactly 5:47 a.m., slid under Vivian's door like a death sentence. 132 pages, spiral-bound, laminated. The title page read, Operational Protocols for Household Management, Revised Edition, February 2026. Vivian sat on the edge of her narrow bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes because no one had told her what to wear instead, and read the first page with growing horror. Subject will wake at 5:47 a.m. daily. No exceptions. Deviation results in penalties. See Appendix C. Subject will shower using provided toiletries only. Water temperature, 38 degrees Celsius. Duration, exactly 7 minutes. Towel must be folded in thirds and hung on the second hook from the left. Subject will dress in clothing provided in closet. Garments are numbered and correspond to daily schedule. Today is Thursday. Wear ensemble number 4. She flipped to Appendix C. The penalties section was 2 pages long, single-spaced. Everything from docked meals for being 30 seconds late to intensive re-education for contaminating surfaces. The document didn't specify what intensive re-education meant, and Vivian decided she didn't want to know. The closet contained 7 identical black dresses, each with a small numbered tag sewn inside the collar. She pulled out number 4. It was simple, modest, expensive, the kind of thing a high-end hotel might dress its concierge staff in. It fit perfectly, which meant Park had somehow known her exact measurements without ever asking. The thought made her skin crawl. At 6:15 a.m., a soft chime sounded from the small speaker in her room's corner. A voice, automated, female, unsettlingly calm, announced, Morning service begins in 15 minutes. Proceed to kitchen. Reference manual pages 23 to 31. Vivian's hands shook as she found the section. Breakfast preparation protocols. Park Ping required 2 soft-boiled eggs, cooked for exactly 6 minutes and 45 seconds. Toast cut into 4 triangles, never rectangles, arranged on the plate at 90-degree intervals. Black coffee at 160 degrees Fahrenheit, measured with the provided thermometer, served in the white cup, with the handle positioned at 45 degrees from the saucer's edge. The kitchen was a sterile nightmare of stainless steel and labeled drawers. Everything had a place. Everything had a purpose. Vivian found the eggs in the refrigerator, which was organized like a pharmacy. Items grouped by category, labels facing forward, expiration dates tracked on a digital display. She set a timer for 6 minutes and 45 seconds. Her hands trembled as she cut the toast, measuring the angles with an actual protractor she found in the utensil drawer. This was insane. This was a level of control that transcended personality quirks and entered the realm of pathology. At 6:30 a.m. exactly, Park emerged from his bedroom. He didn't acknowledge her presence. Simply sat at the dining table, unfolded a cloth napkin with mechanical precision, and waited. Vivian placed the plate before him, the coffee cup at the specified angle, and stepped back 3 paces as the manual instructed. Park picked up his fork, cut into the first egg, The yolk ran golden across the white porcelain, and for a moment, Vivian thought she'd succeeded. Then he froze. His eyes, those dead, calculating eyes, moved from the egg to the toast. Back to the egg. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What time did you start the timer?" His voice was quiet. Too quiet. 6:23 and 15 seconds. The manual said, "The eggs go into boiling water, Miss Boyd." Boiling, not simmering. Not hot. Boiling. He set down his fork with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silent penthouse. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at Seoul's altitude. It takes approximately 90 seconds for room temperature eggs to stop lowering the water temperature and return it to a full boil. Did you account for that? Vivian's mouth went dry. The manual didn't. The manual assumes basic culinary competence. Park stood, his 6'1" frame towering over her. "You've wasted food. You've wasted my time. You failed on your first task. I can make new ones. Give me 5 minutes. No." He pulled off his gloves. She'd never seen him do that before, and dropped them on the table like a gauntlet. "Come with me." He walked toward the West Wing, and every cell in Vivian's body screamed at her to run. But the safe containing her passport flashed in her mind, along with Park's casual threat about her aunt's body in the Han River. She followed. The forbidden wing looked different in daylight. Softer. The morning sun filtered through sheer curtains, illuminating dust particles that danced in the controlled air. Park stopped at the vanity, where Min Seo's 23 items sat in their perfect arrangement. "My wife used to make my breakfast," he said, not looking at Vivian. She understood precision. She understood that details matter because they're the only things we can control in a chaotic world. His finger hovered over a lipstick tube, not quite touching. "She died in a car accident. Black ice, on the Olympic Expressway. The driver was going exactly the speed limit. He was sober. He'd had a full 8 hours of sleep. He'd maintained the vehicle perfectly." Vivian said nothing. There was nothing to say. "Do you know what killed her, Miss Boyd?" Park's voice cracked, just barely. "Randomness. Chaos. The universe's complete indifference to preparation and order. She did everything right, and she died anyway." He turned to face Vivian, and his eyes were no longer dead. They were burning. "So when you fail to boil water properly, when you measure carelessly, when you contaminate my spaces with your disorder." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the muscle twitching in his jaw. "You remind me that I can't control anything, not even the temperature of an egg." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Not painfully, but firmly enough that she couldn't pull away. He dragged her to Min Seo's closet, to the glass case that now stood empty, the red dress gone for decontamination. "You will learn precision," he said softly, "or you will learn what happens to things I can't fix." He released her wrist and walked out, leaving Vivian standing in the shrine to his dead wife, her heart hammering against her ribs. The automated voice chimed from the nearest speaker. "Subject has violated Protocol 47B, unauthorized presence in West Wing. Penalty. Evening meal forfeited. Additional infractions will result in escalation." Vivian looked at her wrist, where Park's fingers had left faint red marks. She'd been here less than 12 hours, and she'd already learned the most important rule of all. Park Pang's obsession with order wasn't about cleanliness. It was about not drowning in grief, and she'd just reminded him he was drowning anyway. Vivian had been Park's prisoner for 11 days when she learned that monsters could have panic attacks. She wasn't supposed to be in his office during the meeting. The manual was explicit. When Park conducted business, she was to remain in her quarters with noise-canceling headphones provided specifically for this purpose. What she didn't hear couldn't be used against him in court, he'd explained with chilling practicality. But the kitchen timer had malfunctioned during lunch preparation, and she'd needed to replace it before his 2 p.m. meal. The storage closet was adjacent to his office, separated only by a wall of decorative screens that weren't nearly as soundproof as Park probably believed. She heard everything. The visitors were Yakuza. She'd picked up enough context over the past week to recognize the formality in Park's tone when he dealt with the Japanese syndicate. 3 men if she counted the footsteps correctly. They were discussing a shipment delay, containers stuck at Busan port due to unexpected inspections. "The product sits in refrigerated units," one man said in accented English. "Every day costs us 50 million won. Your customs contact was supposed to clear this." He did clear it. Park's voice held that dangerous calm Vivian had learned to fear. Someone above him reversed the decision. "Then handle it." "I don't handle the Minister of Maritime Affairs. I negotiate. It takes time." "We don't have time," Park said. A different voice, older, with the kind of authority that didn't need volume. "Our associates in Tokyo are growing, concerned about your reliability." Silence. Vivian pressed herself against the storage closet wall, barely breathing. "Are you questioning my reliability?" Park's words came slower now, more measured. I've moved 400 billion worth of your pharmaceuticals through this port in 3 years. Not one shipment seized. Not one arrest. Zero contamination of the supply chain. Yes, zero contamination. You're very proud of your cleanliness, aren't you? The old man's tone shifted, became almost mocking. We've heard about your peculiarities. The gloves. The rules. Some say Park Peng is more concerned with the arrangement of his desk than the arrangement of business. My personal habits don't affect my professional performance. Don't they? Footsteps. Someone was moving around the office. This room is a museum. Everything positioned just so. Do you spend more time organizing your pens than managing your operations? I suggest you return to the matter at hand. Park's voice had gone quiet. Too quiet. The matter at hand is whether you're still the man we partnered with, or if grief has made you weak. The sound of something sliding across the desk. Papers, maybe. These are the original contracts with your wife's signature as co-guarantor. Minseo Park. Beautiful woman. Terrible shame about the accident. Vivian heard Park's sharp intake of breath through the screen. Don't, Park said. Just that one word, but it vibrated with something raw and dangerous. We're simply noting that she was integral to this partnership. Her family's connections, her diplomatic skills. You were always the enforcer, Park-san. She was the politician. Without her. The crash made Vivian jump. Glass shattering. Park's voice, no longer controlled. Get out. We're not finished. Get out. The roar barely sounded human. Get out before I forget we're allies. Rapid footsteps. The elevator chiming. Vivian waited, counting heartbeats, until she was certain the Yakuza had left. Then she heard something worse than anger. Park was breathing wrong. Fast, shallow gasps like a drowning man. The sound of hands slapping against the desk, again and again. A low moan that might have been words in Korean, or might have been nothing but pain-given voice. Vivian knew that sound. She'd made it herself the night her father died, locked in a hospital bathroom, trying to breathe through the realization that grief wasn't metaphorical. It was physical. It crushed your lungs and stopped your heart and killed you in slow motion. She stepped out from behind the screen. Park was on his knees beside his desk, hands pressed against his chest, surrounded by shattered glass from what had been a crystal decanter. His face was colorless, sweat beading on his forehead. His eyes found hers, wild, unfocused, terrified. Can't, he gasped. Can't breathe. Every survival instinct told Vivian to leave, to let the man who'd imprisoned her suffer alone. But she'd watched her father die of cancer, watched him waste away despite every doctor's promise, and she'd learned that some pain transcended justice and revenge. She knelt in front of him, glass crunching under her knees. You're having a panic attack, she said quietly. You're not dying. I know it feels like you are, but you're not. He shook his head violently, fingers clawing at his collar. Look at me. Vivian grabbed his hands, his bare hands, the gloves discarded somewhere in his spiral. His skin was burning hot. 4 counts in. Can you do that? Breathe in for 4. I can't. Yes, you can. With me. In 2, 3, 4. She exaggerated her own breathing, making it visible. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Park tried to follow, failed, gasped like he was drowning. Again, Vivian said firmly. You're in control. You're always in control, right? So control this. In 2, 3, 4. This time he managed it. His eyes locked onto hers like an anchor. Hold it. 7 counts. You can count to 7, can't you? You do it every morning in the mirror. How did she know that? She didn't. But she could see it in the way he structured everything in multiples of 7. The 7 minutes in the shower. The 7 minutes at his wife's shrine. The 7. Out, she commanded. 8 counts. Let it go. They breathed together for 3 minutes, maybe 5. Time felt elastic when someone was breaking apart in your hands. Gradually, Park's color returned. His breathing steadied. His death grip on her hands loosened. When he could speak again, his voice was hoarse. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, Vivian said. Not like this. He looked at their joined hands, his bare skin against hers, the first time he'd touched anyone without gloves in who knows how long. The intimacy of it seemed to register slowly, like he was coming back from somewhere far away. He pulled back, but not violently, almost reluctantly. They mentioned her, he said finally, still kneeling in the broken glass. They used her name like a weapon. I know, I heard. You were supposed to be in your quarters. The timer broke. I needed. Vivian stopped. Does it matter? Park looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, like he was seeing something other than a contamination or a punishment, or a replacement ghost. You didn't run. Where would I go? You have my passport. No. He shook his head. When I couldn't, he gestured vaguely at himself, at the evidence of his weakness scattered around them. You could have left. You could have watched me suffer. You should have. Yeah, Vivian said quietly. I should have. They knelt there among the shattered crystal, two people who shouldn't have been in the same room, let alone breathing in sync. Park stood first, offering her his hand. She took it, let him pull her to her feet. Neither of them mentioned the glass cutting into their skin or the blood on their knees. This doesn't change anything, Park said, but his voice lacked conviction. The rules still apply. You're your prisoner. I know. Vivian stepped back, creating distance. But maybe add a protocol to your manual. What to do when the warden has a breakdown. For the first time since she'd met him, Park Ping almost smiled. Page 133, he said. Emergency psychological protocols. Already there. Of course it is. He picked up his gloves from where they'd fallen, stared at them like they belonged to someone else, then put them in his pocket instead of putting them on. The Yakuza will be back. This isn't over. Nothing's ever over with men like that. Vivian moved toward the door. My father used to say the only thing worse than owing money to bad people is owing loyalty to them. Your father was wise. My father was broke and dead by 52. Not sure wisdom enters into it. She left Park standing in his perfect office, with its imperfect shattered glass, and for the first time in 11 days, she didn't check behind her to make sure he wasn't following. She was learning his patterns, his breathing, his breaking points. And that, she realized, might be the most dangerous thing of all. The dress arrived at Vivian's door at 6 p.m. on a Friday, 3 weeks into her captivity. Not in a box, not wrapped in tissue paper, but hanging on a mobile rack like a specter, accompanied by a single note card in Park's precise handwriting. Wear this tonight. Hair down. Minimal jewelry. Be ready by 8 p.m. It was the red Valentino. Cleaned, restored, and apparently no longer too sacred to touch. Vivian stared at it for a full minute, her stomach twisting. This was a test, or a punishment, or both. With Park, everything existed in multiples: control and chaos, devotion and cruelty, grief masquerading as order. She put it on at 7:43 p.m., her hands steadier than they should have been. The silk remembered her body, sliding into place like it had been waiting. In the mirror, she looked like someone's expensive mistake, beautiful, and wrong, and utterly out of her depth. Park was waiting in the living room when she emerged, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than a car. His eyes traveled over her once, clinical and cold, before he handed her a small velvet box. Put these on. Diamond earrings. Simple, elegant, worth more than her aunt's apartment building. Where are we going? Vivian's voice came out smaller than she intended. The Shilla Hotel. Annual charity gala for the Seoul Business Coalition. Park adjusted his cufflinks with mechanical precision. You'll stand beside me. You'll smile when appropriate. You'll speak only if directly addressed, and then only in English. Do you understand? Why? She looked down at the dress, at Minseo's dress. Why this? Why me? Because the Yakuza representatives will be there. Park's smile was a knife edge. And I want them to see that I've moved on. That their psychological games don't affect me. So I'm a prop. You're a statement. He moved closer, adjusting the fall of her hair over her shoulders with gloved fingers that didn't quite touch her skin. They think grief has made me weak. That without Minseo, I'm just a violent man with expensive habits. Tonight, you prove them wrong. By wearing a dead woman's dress. By wearing it better than she did. The cruelty in his voice was perfunctory, almost bored. But Vivian saw the muscle twitch in his jaw. This hurt him too. He was weaponizing his own pain, and she was the bullet. The Shilla Hotel ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across marble floors. Women in couture drifted like exotic birds. Men in custom suits discussed mergers and acquisitions over champagne that cost more per bottle than Vivian made in a month. Park's hand found the small of her back as they entered, possessive, proprietary. To anyone watching, they looked like exactly what they were pretending to be, a powerful man and his beautiful companion. Smile, he murmured against her ear. You're supposed to be enjoying yourself. Vivian smiled. It felt like baring teeth. They made it 17 minutes before the Yakuza found them. The old man from the office, Nakamura, she heard someone call him, approached with two younger associates flanking him like bodyguards. His eyes went to the dress immediately, recognition flickering across his weathered face. Park-san, a slight bow, just shy of respectful. What an interesting choice of companion. Nakamura-san, Park's return bow was shallower. May I introduce Vivian Boyd? Charming. Nakamura's smile didn't reach his eyes. That dress seems familiar. Valentino, isn't it? Red has always been a dangerous color. The color of passion. Of blood. The color of prosperity in my culture, Park said smoothly. Miss Boyd wears it well, don't you think? I think. Nakamura stepped closer to Vivian, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the calculation in his expression. I think some things are too sacred to be replaced. Some losses should remain losses. His hand reached out, fingers extending toward the fabric of the dress. Park's hand shot out faster, gripping Nakamura's wrist mid-air with enough force that the old man's eyes widened. The entire ballroom seemed to freeze, conversations dying in concentric circles around them. Don't. Park's voice was quiet, lethal. Touch her. It's just a dress, Park said. It's my dress. On my companion. At my tolerance. Park released Nakamura's wrist but didn't step back. The shipment clears Monday. I've handled the minister. Transfer the payment by Wednesday, or our arrangement ends. Nakamura rubbed his wrist, something like respect flickering in his eyes. You're not as weak as I thought. I never was. You mistook precision for fragility. Park's hand returned to Vivian's back, fingers splayed possessively across the red silk. Now if you'll excuse us, we have other guests to greet. He guided Vivian away before Nakamura could respond, his grip firm enough to leave impressions. They didn't stop walking until they reached a private terrace overlooking the Seoul skyline, away from the crowd and the music and the eyes that had watched Park Pyung stake a claim on something other than his dead wife's memory. Are you all right? The question surprised them both. Vivian turned to face him. You almost broke his wrist. He was going to touch you. He was going to touch the dress. Same thing. Park's hands were shaking. She could see it even through the gloves. In that moment, it was the same thing. The admission hung between them like a confession. Vivian understood then what she'd been too naive to see before. Park hadn't brought her here to prove he'd moved on. He'd brought her here to prove he hadn't. To show his enemies that he could still feel something fierce enough to fight for, even if that something was just a woman in a dead wife's dress. They'll see this as a weakness, Vivian said quietly. Let them. Park loosened his tie, a gesture so unlike his usual rigidity that it felt obscene. I'm tired of pretending grief makes you strong. It makes you insane. It makes you lock women in penthouses and force them to wear ghosts. Is that what I am? A ghost? He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time she saw past the OCD and the cruelty and the obsessive control. She saw a man who'd built a prison so elaborate he'd forgotten he was the one locked inside. No, Park said finally. That's the problem. You're inconveniently, infuriatingly alive. Music drifted from the ballroom, something classical, probably Mozart. Through the glass doors, Vivian could see couples beginning to dance. We should go back, she said. People will talk. They're already talking. But Park offered his arm anyway, formal and old-fashioned. One dance. Then we leave. I don't know how to dance, like they do. Neither do I. Min Seo was the dancer. He said her name, without flinching for the first time since Vivian had met him. But I'm very good at following patterns. They returned to the ballroom, and Park led Vivian onto the dance floor with the same precision he applied to everything else. His hand at her waist, her hand in his, moving through steps he'd probably learned for someone else, in some other life. Across the room, Nakamura watched them with narrowed eyes. Park didn't notice. He was too busy counting steps, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Like grief could be choreographed, like loss could be organized into something beautiful if you just followed the right sequence. And Vivian, who'd spent 3 weeks learning the terrifying architecture of his mind, followed his lead and pretended not to notice when his grip tightened every time someone passed too close. He was protecting her. From what? She wasn't sure. Maybe from himself. The nightmare started on the 32nd night. Vivian woke to screaming, raw animal sounds that didn't seem capable of coming from a human throat. She grabbed the robe from her door hook and ran into the hallway before her brain caught up with her body, before she remembered that Park's suffering wasn't her responsibility. His bedroom door was open. She'd never seen it open before. Park was sitting upright in bed, eyes wide but unseeing, hands clawing at his chest like he was trying to dig something out from beneath his ribs. The sheets were soaked with sweat. His face was a mask of anguish that made Vivian's own chest constrict in sympathy. Park, she approached slowly, like he was a wounded animal. Park, wake up. He didn't hear her. His mouth moved, forming words in Korean. The same phrase over and over, increasingly desperate. Vivian sat on the edge of the bed and grabbed his shoulders. Park, you're dreaming. Wake up. His eyes snapped into focus. For a moment, he didn't recognize her. Then awareness crashed over him like a wave, and he jerked back, putting distance between them. Get out. His voice was destroyed, hoarse from screaming. You were having a nightmare. I said get out. But Vivian had seen something in those few seconds of consciousness. Not anger. Terror. The kind of fear that lived in bone marrow, and waited for darkness to show its face. "What did you dream about?" she asked quietly. Park's laugh was bitter. "What do you think? The same thing I dream about every night." He ran, shaking hands through his sweat-dampened hair. "The accident. The car. Her face through the window. The black ice on the Olympic Expressway." Vivian repeated the detail he'd told her weeks ago. "The driver who did everything right." "Yes." The word came out flat. "Dead." "You're lying." Park's head snapped up, eyes dangerous. "Excuse me, you're lying." Vivian stood, crossing her arms. "I've watched you for a month. You don't sleep. You barely eat. You've built an entire religion around controlling every microscopic detail of your environment. That's not how people grieve accidents. That's how people grieve guilt." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "You should go back to your room, Miss Boyd. What really happened to Minseo?" "I told you. You told me the story you tell everyone else. The sanitized version. The one that lets you play the tragic widower instead of—" She stopped, seeing his face. "Instead of whatever you actually are." Park stood, and even in his disheveled state, bare-chested, haunted, human, he was intimidating. "You want the truth? Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." He walked to the window, pressing his forehead against the glass, like he needed the cold to keep him conscious. There was no black ice. The weather was clear. 58 degrees, low humidity, perfect visibility. Vivian's stomach dropped. Minseo was driving home from her sister's apartment in Gangnam. "It was 10:47 p.m. I know, because I called her at 10:46. His voice was eerily calm now, the tone of someone who'd rehearsed this confession 1,000 times in his head. "We'd had a fight that morning. I don't even remember what it was about. Something insignificant. The way I'd organized her closet, maybe. Or the fact that I'd thrown away her favorite coffee mug because it had a hairline crack." "Park." She answered on the second ring. She was angry. Told me I needed help. That my obsessions were getting worse. That she couldn't live in a museum anymore. He pressed harder against the glass, like he wanted to go through it. I told her she was being dramatic. That if she couldn't appreciate the effort I put into maintaining our home, maybe she should stay at her sister's permanently. Vivian felt ice spreading through her veins. She said, "Fine." Just that. "Fine, Park. I'll stay here tonight, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, when you're being rational." But I couldn't let it go. I kept calling. She kept declining. So I called again. And again. His fist connected with the window. Not hard enough to break it, just hard enough to crack something inside himself. The 15th time I called, she answered. She was crying. She said, "What do you want from me? What do you fucking want? You don't have to." I told her I wanted her to come home. I wanted her to apologize for making me feel like I was crazy for caring about order. I wanted her to understand that the rules existed to protect us, to keep chaos away. Park's voice cracked. She was so angry she was sobbing. She said she'd come home. She'd come home right now, and we'd settle this. She was yelling, crying, and I heard. He stopped. Couldn't continue. "You heard the crash," Vivian whispered. Park nodded, still facing the window. She was on the Bluetooth. I heard her gasp. Heard the sound of tires on asphalt. Heard metal crumpling. Heard silence. His shoulders shook. I screamed her name for 3 minutes before the emergency services arrived at the scene. 3 minutes of nothing, just my voice echoing back at me through a dead phone line. Vivian's hand covered her mouth. The police report said she'd been traveling 95 kilometers per hour in an 80 zone. Swerved to avoid a vehicle that had merged incorrectly. Overcorrected, hit the median barrier. Park finally turned to face her, and his eyes were hollowed out, ancient. But I know the truth. She was speeding because I'd upset her. She was crying so hard she couldn't see clearly. She was distracted because I wouldn't stop calling, wouldn't stop demanding, wouldn't stop trying to control everything. It was an accident. It was murder. The words came out sharp, final. I murdered my wife with a phone call and obsessive-compulsive disorder, and the absolute certainty that I knew better than everyone else how the world should work. He walked to his nightstand, opened the drawer, and pulled out a phone. Not his current one, an older model, screen cracked. He handed it to Vivian. "I keep it charged. I keep the voicemail she left 2 hours before she died. Want to hear it?" Vivian shook her head, but Park was already pressing play. Minseo's voice filled the room, warm and alive and so achingly normal. "Hey, it's me. I'm sorry about this morning. You're not crazy, you're just you. And I love you anyway. I'll be home by midnight. Maybe we can watch that show you like, the one about the detective with OCD. Might make you feel less alone. I'm picking up your favorite dumplings from that place in Itaewon. The one that closes at 11, so I have to hurry. Love you. See you soon." The message ended. Park took the phone back, stared at it like it was a loaded gun. "She was getting me dumplings," he said softly. She'd forgiven me already, and I was still calling her, still punishing her for daring to suggest I needed help. He put the phone back in the drawer with ritualistic care. So yes, Miss Boyd. I have nightmares. I dream about her face through the windshield. I dream about the sound of the impact. Mostly I dream about the fact that the last thing I said to her was, "You're being irrational." Vivian didn't know what to say. There were no words for this kind of guilt, the kind that burrowed into your DNA and rewrote who you were. The OCD got worse after, Park continued. The doctors said it was my mind's way of trying to prevent future chaos. If I could control everything, every surface, every schedule, every person, then maybe I could stop bad things from happening again. He laughed, the sound broken. But you can't control chaos. You can only pretend you can, until it kills someone you love. Is that why you kept me? Vivian asked. Because I wore her dress? Because in some twisted way you thought you could save her by controlling me instead? Park looked at her for a long moment. I kept you because when I saw you in that dress, in that chair, I felt something other than guilt for the first time in 3 years. I felt angry. And anger is so much easier than grief. He walked back to his bed, sat on the edge like an old man. Now you know. The monster isn't just a mafia boss with OCD. He's a man who killed his wife, with his inability to let anything be imperfect. Vivian stood in the doorway, watching him. She should leave, should let him drown in his self-loathing, should feel vindicated that her captor was suffering. Instead, she heard herself say, "It wasn't your fault." Park's head jerked up. "It wasn't your fault," Vivian repeated. "It was an accident. A terrible random accident that would have happened whether you called or not. She chose to speed. She chose to drive while upset. You didn't force her. I might as well have." "No." Vivian's voice was firm. "My father died of cancer. I spent 2 years thinking I caused it, because I'd been too stressed about money, because I'd added to his worries. My therapist told me that's called magical thinking, the belief that we're powerful enough to cause catastrophes through our actions or thoughts." She moved closer. "You're not that powerful, Park. You're just a man who loved his wife and said something stupid during a fight. That's not murder. That's being human." Park stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "You can't control everything," Vivian said quietly. "Not death. Not grief. Not me." She headed for the door, then paused. "But you can control whether you keep punishing yourself. Whether you keep punishing me for wearing a dress that was just a dress." She left him sitting in his bedroom, surrounded by his perfect furniture and his imperfect memories, and wondered if truth was supposed to feel this much like breaking. The attack came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 6 weeks after Vivian had first worn the red dress. She woke to the sound of gunfire, not the movie version, but the real thing. Sharp cracks that punched through the penthouse's silence like a fist through glass. Her body moved on instinct, rolling out of bed and pressing herself against the wall farthest from the door. The automated security system was screaming, red lights strobing through the gap under her door. Then Park's voice cut through the chaos, calm and cold. "Vivian, stay in your room. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." She heard his footsteps running past, heard Jung-ho's voice barking orders in Korean, heard more gunshots, closer now inside the penthouse. Vivian locked the door with shaking hands and looked around her small room for anything resembling a weapon. A lamp, a chair, nothing that would stop a bullet. The gunfire intensified. She heard glass shattering, men shouting, the distinctive pop-pop-pop of automatic weapons. This wasn't a robbery. This was an execution. Then she heard Park scream, not in pain, but in fury, and something inside her chest snapped. She unlocked the door. The living room was a war zone. 3 bodies on the floor, Park's security team. She realized with horror. Jung-ho was behind the overturned dining table, returning fire at the elevator, where 4 men in tactical gear were advancing. And Park. Park was in the center of the room, suit jacket discarded, white shirt stained with blood that might or might not be his, firing a handgun with the same mechanical precision he applied to everything else. But his eyes were wild, scanning the room, and Vivian realized with a jolt that he was looking for her. "Get back," he shouted when he saw her. "Vivian, get the fuck back." One of the attackers broke from the elevator, sprinting toward the hallway where Vivian stood frozen. Park's gun swung toward him, but the magazine was empty. The click of an empty chamber was the loudest sound Vivian had ever heard. The attacker raised his weapon, aimed at Park's chest. Vivian didn't think. She grabbed the heavy crystal vase from the hallway table, one of Park's precisely positioned decorative pieces, and hurled it with every ounce of strength she had. It caught the attacker in the side of the head with a wet crack. He stumbled, his shot going wide, and Jung-ho's bullet caught him in the throat a second later. Park's eyes met Vivian's across the chaos. Something passed between them, recognition, terror, something else she didn't have time to name. The West Wing, Jung-ho shouted in English. "They're trying to flank us through the West Wing." Park's face went white. The Forbidden Wing. The shrine. Minseo's preserved sanctuary. "No," he breathed. Then, louder, desperate. "No one goes in there." But the West Wing doors were already opening, kicked in by 2 more attackers. Vivian could see them from where she stood. Young men, Yakuza tattoos visible at their collars, assault rifles raised. They were going to destroy it. 3 years of perfect preservation, of ritualistic mourning, of Park's elaborate architecture of grief, gone in seconds of automatic gunfire. Park looked at the West Wing, then at Vivian, then back at the West Wing. She saw the calculation happening behind his eyes, saw him weighing the impossible, his past, or her future. "Jung-ho," Park said quietly, "give me the incendiary." "Sir?" "The grenade, now." Jung-ho's eyes widened, but he didn't question. He pulled a small cylindrical device from his tactical vest and tossed it to Park. Park caught it one-handed, his face a mask of terrible calm. "Get Vivian to the service elevator. Take her down to the garage. There's a car waiting, keys in the sun visor. Drive to the safe house in Busan." "What are you gonna do?" Vivian's voice came out small, terrified. Park pulled the pin on the grenade. "Something I should have done 3 years ago." He threw it through the West Wing doors. The explosion was smaller than Vivian expected, more controlled, designed for structure, not people. But the fire that followed was hungry and immediate. It caught on Minseo's curtains, spread to the vanity with its 23 precisely arranged items, licked across the hardwood floors Park had preserved like a museum. The climate-controlled case containing the red dress cracked in the heat, glass spiderwebbing, seals breaking. Park watched it burn with an expression Vivian couldn't read. The attackers in the West Wing were screaming, trying to retreat through flames. One of them made it to the hallway before Jung-ho put him down. "Sir, we need to move." Jung-ho grabbed Vivian's arm, pulling her toward the service entrance. But Vivian wrenched free, running to Park instead. "What are you doing? We have to go." "I'm ending it." Park's voice was eerily calm as he reloaded his gun with mechanical precision. "Nakamura sent them. This is his answer to my disrespect at the gala, to my choosing you over his approval. Then we run. We both run. They'll follow. They'll find you." Park turned to face her, and his eyes were clear for the first time since she'd known him. "But if I give them what they came for, if I let them see me broken, they'll leave satisfied." "You're gonna let them kill you?" Vivian's voice cracked. "I'm going to let them think they did." He pushed her toward Jung-ho. "Go. Trust me. For once in your stubborn life, just trust me and go." The West Wing was fully engulfed now, flames consuming 3 years of grief in minutes. The smell of burning silk, of melting perfume bottles, of a past turning to ash. Through the smoke, Vivian saw the dress, Minseo's red dress, blackening and curling, finally free from its glass prison. Park saw it too. His hand twitched toward the flames like he wanted to save it, to preserve it just a little longer. Then he let his hand fall. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and Vivian wasn't sure if he was talking to Minseo, to her, or to himself. More gunfire from the elevator. Nakamura's men, regrouping for a final push. Jung-ho physically lifted Vivian, carrying her toward the service entrance despite her protests. The last thing she saw before the door closed was Park standing alone in the center of his burning penthouse, surrounded by the ashes of the woman he'd loved and the museum he'd built to keep her alive. He was smiling. It was the saddest thing Vivian had ever seen. The service elevator descended in silence, except for her ragged breathing and Jung-ho's steady heartbeat. 53 floors, each one taking her farther from the man who'd imprisoned her, protected her, broken himself open in front of her. "He'll be okay," Jung-ho said quietly. "Park SS, I always has a plan." But Vivian had seen his face as the flames consumed everything he'd spent 3 years protecting. That wasn't the face of a man with a plan. That was the face of a man finally letting go. The elevator reached the garage. Jung-ho found the car, a black sedan, keys exactly where Park said they'd be. He opened the passenger door for Vivian, ever the professional. "Busan Safe House. 3 hours drive. I'll explain everything when we arrive." Vivian climbed in but didn't put on her seatbelt. He burned it. He burned all of it. Yes. For me. He destroyed the only things he had left of her for me. Jung-ho started the engine. "No, Miss Boyd." He destroyed them for himself. "You were just finally worth saving more than a memory." The car pulled out of the garage as sirens wailed in the distance. Above them, 53 floors up, Park Peng's perfect world was burning. And Vivian realized she was crying for a man who'd never asked her permission to make her matter. The Seoul skyline receded in the rearview mirror, ablaze with more than just city lights now. Somewhere in that fire was a man learning that love meant letting go, even if it killed you. Especially if it killed you. Park didn't die in the fire. Vivian learned this 3 days later when Jung-ho's phone rang at 4:23 a.m. in the Busan safe house. She was awake. She'd barely slept since the attack, kept seeing flames consuming red silk, kept hearing the calm in Park's voice as he chose her life over his shrine. Jung-ho spoke in rapid Korean, his expression shifting from concern to relief to something approaching surprise. "He wants to talk to you," Jung-ho said, holding out the phone. Vivian's hands shook as she took it. "Hello? Miss Boyd." Park's voice sounded different. Hoarse from smoke, maybe, or from something else. "I hope Jung-ho has been taking adequate care of you. You're alive." Disappointed? Furious. And she was. 3 days of not knowing, of imagining his body in the ruins of his perfect penthouse, of carrying the weight of someone else's sacrifice. "You let me think you were dead. I was handling the aftermath." Nakamura needed to believe he'd won. A pause. "The fire destroyed most of the penthouse. The West Wing is completely gone. The insurance investigators are calling it a gas leak. Very tragic. Very expensive." Vivian pressed her palm against the window, looking out at the gray Busan morning. "And the truth? The truth is, I killed 4 of Nakamura's men, and lost 3 of my own. The truth is, I violated the treaty between our organizations by refusing to hand over the woman he demanded as recompense for my disrespect." Park's voice hardened. "The truth is, there will be consequences, but I'm still breathing, so I consider that a victory." He wanted me? Nakamura wanted. He wanted to hurt me. "You were convenient." The sound of movement, footsteps on what might have been gravel. I'm standing in what used to be the Forbidden Wing. There's nothing left. The vanity, the photographs, the closet, all ash. Even the climate control system melted. Vivian closed her eyes. "I'm sorry. Don't be. I should have burned it years ago." He exhaled slowly. "Jung-ho will drive you back to Seoul this afternoon. I have something for you." "Park, 3 p.m. Don't be late. You know how I feel about punctuality." The line went dead. The drive back took 4 hours through rain that turned the highway into a gray blur. Vivian spent it in silence, trying to prepare herself for whatever came next. Park had saved her. Park had destroyed everything he'd spent 3 years preserving. Park had let her believe he might be dead rather than call and ease her worry. She had no idea what any of it meant. The penthouse was a disaster. Scorch marks on the walls, broken glass crunching underfoot, the acrid smell of burnt fabric and melted plastic. The West Wing was cordoned off with yellow construction tape, the doorway a gaping wound showing nothing but charred framework. Park stood in the center of the living room wearing jeans and a black t-shirt. Vivian had never seen him in anything but suits. No gloves. No tie. His hair was slightly messy, and there was a bandage on his left forearm. He looked almost human. "Miss Boyd," he gestured to the debris-covered sofa. "Please sit." "I'll stand." "Suit yourself." He walked to what remained of his desk and picked up a small item. Her passport. The blue cover was pristine, untouched by the chaos. "I believe this belongs to you." Vivian stared at it like it might be a trap. "What's the catch?" "No catch. You're free to go." Park held it out, his hand steady. "I've also transferred 150 million won to an account in your name. Enough to clear your debts and your aunt's, with some left over. Your visa has been extended through certain channels. Legal channels, more or less." She didn't take the passport. "Why?" "Because I held you prisoner for 6 weeks. Because I forced you to wear a dead woman's dress and play a role in my psychotic grief theater. Because you saved my life by throwing a vase at an armed gunman, which was either very brave or very stupid." He set the passport on the debris-covered coffee table between them. "Pick whichever reason makes you feel better about taking it. And if I don't want to go?" Park's carefully neutral expression cracked. "Excuse me. You heard me." Vivian stepped over broken glass, moving closer. "What if I want to stay?" "Then you're more damaged than I thought." But his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe." She looked around at the ruins of his perfect world. "Or maybe I'm the only person crazy enough to understand why you built all this in the first place." "Vivian. No more Miss Boyd. No more protocols. No more 47-page manuals telling me how to fold a towel." She picked up the passport, held it, then set it back down. "If I stay, we do this differently. No prisoner. No replacement ghost. No rules except the ones normal people follow." Park laughed, the sound broken and real. "I don't know how to do normal. Then we'll figure it out together." She gestured at the destroyed penthouse. "You have to rebuild this place anyway. Might as well rebuild yourself while you're at it." "I'm a criminal. I run guns and pharmaceuticals through every port in Korea. I've killed people. I'll kill more." Park's honesty was brutal. "Normal isn't in my vocabulary. Neither is letting go. But you burned your wife's shrine to save me. So maybe you're more capable of change than you think. They stood in the wreckage, two broken people negotiating the terms of something that had no name yet. Not love. Too soon for that. Not captivity. That had ended the moment Park handed over her passport. Something else. Something raw and new and terrifying. One condition, Park said finally. You stay because you want to. Not because you owe me. Not because you pity me. You stay because this. He gestured between them. Whatever this is, matters to you. It matters. Vivian surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. I spent 6 weeks watching you try to control chaos. Now I want to see what happens when you stop fighting it. Park moved closer. Close enough that she could see the sleeplessness in his eyes, the smoke damage on his skin, the vulnerability of a man without his armor of gloves and protocols. I'm going to disappoint you. I'm going to relapse. There will be days when I need everything at right angles or I can't breathe. Then I'll help you breathe. Like I did during your panic attack. She reached out, took his hand, his bare hand, warm and real. But no more cages. No more taking my freedom, because you're afraid of losing control. No more cages, Park agreed. His fingers tightened around hers. Though I reserve the right to be extremely specific about how the coffee is made, I can live with that. They stood holding hands in a burned-out penthouse, while construction crews worked in the West Wing, dismantling the last physical evidence of Park's 3-year shrine to the past. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul sprawled beneath them, chaotic, unpredictable, utterly beyond anyone's control. I don't know how to do this, Park admitted quietly. How to be with someone without trying to arrange them. Neither do I. I don't know how to be with someone who held me hostage and then burned down his life to save mine. Vivian squeezed his hand. But maybe that's the point. We figure it out as we go. Park pulled her closer, rested his forehead against hers, in a gesture that was tender and terrified. No protocols? Well, Vivian smiled against his skin. Maybe one. Coffee at 160 degrees. I've gotten used to it. He laughed. A real laugh, startled and genuine. That's all you're keeping. That's all you're getting. They stayed like that while the construction noise echoed through the empty penthouse, and Seoul's morning light turned the smoke-stained windows gold. Two people learning that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let someone else be unpredictable. Park's phone buzzed. A reminder, probably. Some meeting or inspection or carefully scheduled obligation. He silenced it without looking. First rule of the new order, he said. No more timers. Second rule, Vivian countered. You teach me to dance properly. Not that formal ballroom stuff. Real dancing. I don't know how to real dance. Then we'll learn together. Park kissed her forehead, soft and careful, like she might break. Third rule. You tell me when I'm being insane. You're always insane. That's not a rule, that's a constant. Fair enough. Outside, Seoul hummed with its 8 million stories, each one chaotic and messy and beautifully uncontrolled. Inside, Park Peng stood in the ruins of his grief, with a woman who'd accidentally taught him that some things, some people, were worth more than perfect preservation. The passport sat on the coffee table, unclaimed. Vivian noticed Park glancing at it, and she picked it up, walked to the window, and tucked it into her pocket. Just so we're clear, she said. I'm keeping this, and if you ever try to take it again, I'm gone. Understood. Park moved to stand beside her. And just so we're clear, I'm grateful you're staying, even if I'm terrible at showing it. You'll learn, or you'll throw another vase at my head. That too. They stood together watching the city wake up, and for the first time in 3 years, Park Peng didn't count the minutes, or measure the angles, or try to control what came next. He just breathed, and that, Vivian decided, was enough of a beginning. Thanks for watching. Please like, comments, and subscribe.